The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Kibin, Alleyne. Coming up, organizations are returning back to the office. Organization Jobs for the Future joins Open Tuesday to discuss the future of the workplace. Should employers find a way to incorporate hybrid workflows for employees? Then, in honor of Women's History Month, the National Women's History Museum joins me for a discussion on the recognition of female achievements. Are schools still struggling when it comes to education about Women's History Month? After that, the Dyckman Farmhouse Alliance is helping local residents tackle food insecurity through urban farming. Will the organization ensure the program remains accessible and inclusive to the community? And Florida's House of Representatives passed the Don't Say Gay bill targeting LGBT youth. Is there an appropriate age to teach the youth about gender and sexuality? So please stick around. Open BxRx Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. I'm happy to announce today is Open Tuesday's first day back in studio after 2 years of taping virtually. BronxNet is one of many organizations that are taking the leap and returning back to the workplace. Joining me for a discussion about the state and future of the workplace is Tameshia Bridges of JFF. Tameshia, thank you so much for joining me.
Great. Thank you for having me, and welcome back to the studio.
Thank you. Now, as society transitions back into the workplace, whether that be fully in person or hybrid, what are your thoughts on returning?
Yeah, so I think that the question around returning to work is really dependent on who is determined, who is ready to go back to work. And that question really varies depending on the type of job you have. And I think we have to be mindful that returning back to the office or back to work is not an option for all workers. And it's actually been the reality for many of workers over the last 2 years. So is your job a frontline job that requires you to be face to face? Do you live in an area that has reliable broadband? Or does your life, even particularly care needs, as you talk about the needs of women and families, provide you with the space and the flexibility to be able to work from home? So I think it's really a complicated question. And so do I think we're ready for this? I think in some ways we are, and I think I applaud the companies who are making it an option for their workers. And I also hope that they're really thinking about and reshaping what their cultures look like, what the internal kind of infrastructure looks like for hybrid work environments. It's not as easy as like flipping a switch or sending a memo and telling everyone to come back to work. You really have to be mindful of what workers' needs are to really be able to make it work and to help make people successful. I'm a full-time remote worker, and so I also recognize that it's also a big privilege, and it's one that comes with a lot of complexity that I have to navigate as a worker, and my employer also has to navigate as well.
Now, COVID-19 changed the way society looks for work. There are now options whether you choose if you prefer to work on site, hybrid, or fully remote, like you said you're doing yourself. Here at BronxNet, we've transitioned into a hybrid workflow, but do you think this flexibility is something folks applying to jobs will be looking for moving forward?
I think some workers will. I think really workers are in an interesting position right now where they have a lot of options, and some would even say a lot of power in terms of determining where they want to work, the kind of work they want to do, And so I think it is something that more workers are going to be looking at. As the survey and the data shows, I think more workers do want to work from home, but it's about making sure it's in a company that works for them, that meets their needs, and that the culture is right. So I think that the ability to work from home is becoming an important variable for a lot of people in choosing to go back to work, but I'm not sure if it's the most important variable.
So that kind of leads to my next question. Do you think employers should find a way to incorporate hybrid workflows for employees if possible?
I do think they should, and I think it is, like I said, it's a matter of both the structure and the technology of workplaces as much as it is making sure the culture can adapt and work for meeting the needs of workers that are both at home and workers who are in the office. And how do you make sure that teams can work well and constructively together? So I think it's something that employers should consider if they want to have that on the table. And I think it's becoming a competitive issue as well, depending on the industry that you're in.
Now, in many cases, you can't work from home, and I think you mentioned it before, it is very much a privilege to be able to work from home. But do you find it necessary for people to even go back to the office if they were able to work from home efficiently?
I think, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, you shouldn't make your workers go back to work. Just let everybody work from home. I do think that that is a conversation and a decision that is made by employers. But I do think that it's a decision that we hope is made with the input and understanding of their workforces and their workforce needs. I think there's a lot of variables at play. I think many employees would say that they have proven that they are able to work and be productive at home, and maybe more so. So I think it's something that is complex, and I think it should be taken in consideration in the totality of how an organization operates, both in terms of from a business function and also from the perspective of meeting the needs of their workforce.
Now, people are giving up a lot of convenience as they return to the workplace, but I really want to know, why may employers want their employees to return to the office?
Yeah, and I think it's a variety of reasons. I think some employers and some companies have cultures that really thrive on face-to-face interaction, or structures that really necessitate people in office. Maybe there's a lot of teamwork that it happens. Maybe there's a lot of customer-facing work that you can't really do as well or as productively at home as you can do in an office. And I think there are also some financial realities for companies to consider when having workers work remotely, especially for out of state workers. There's tax implications. Like I said, there's a lot that goes into the decision around how to have um, workers work remotely in the long term. I think, yes, we did have to like flip a very quick switch back in 2020 to make this happen. And I think people are now kind of figuring out the long term sustainability of it, both for employers and for workers.
Now, as someone who specializes in racial equity and justice, what are your thoughts on the finding that women, especially Black women and women of color, felt safer and more comfortable working from home?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember seeing that study a while ago, and it has definitely been a conversation amongst my friends and my peers around what it has looked like and really felt like to work from home. And I would say that at the beginning of the pandemic, especially during the summer of 2020 with George Floyd's murder, the uprisings, and all of everything that was happening that summer around race and equity, being at home definitely felt safer, right? I think we were able to kind of choose the spaces and how and when we were processing everything that was coming with us, or coming at us. We could choose the spaces that we wanted to engage. And I'm not sure we would have had that same level of safety and boundary setting had we been in the workplace and maybe had to have conversations with people that we may not have wanted to have or felt prepared or emotionally ready to have. So I think there is something about the last 2 years that has made it feel um, safer for Black women and for Black people and people of color across the board to feel more safe and comfortable, particularly psychologically safer, emotionally safer, being at home versus being in the office. There's not as many microaggressions to deal with, or other things that go largely unnoticed when you're working in the safety and comfort of your home that you don't realize you're facing when you're in an office sometimes.
Now, since we're on the topic of safety, I want to talk about the fears people have just about being in public and going back to work again. We've made some progress, but COVID still exists. How can employers ensure employees are feeling safe and they're in a safe work environment?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. I think it goes back to following your local public health ordinances if they're still in place, around like masking and distancing and safety and all of that. So this is still, COVID is still a public health issue. And so following the guidance from your local public health organization, I would say is priority number one. I think from there, it's about employers really getting feedback from their employees and asking what is it that employees need to feel safe and really listening to what they are saying. And then most importantly, taking action on the recommendations and concerns that people have. If people feel safer wearing masks, then allow people to wear masks in a culture of safety and comfort. If people need to work at a greater distance, then allow people maybe to move workstations and things like that. But I think it's about both paying attention to the science and also listening to the needs and the concerns that your employees have.
Now, this is going to take some getting used to, and some people are still on the fence, but I want to focus on some positives. What are some really great things about returning back to the office?
Yeah, even though I'm a 100% remote worker, I would say that there is something about the cohesion, right, that comes with working together in an office. In some ways, working face to face allows for teams to gel easier. And to get to know each other, to learn each other's ways of working. I think there's greater levels of transparency and conversation that happen in person that don't happen in the same way via Zoom or via technology. I think we've gotten used to it, but it's also just easier to collaborate and to bounce ideas off of each other, to check in with people without needing to schedule. I would say another thing, in addition to like the social and collaboration aspects of it, I do wonder if work happens at a more relaxed pace, perhaps, when you're in person. I know pre-pandemic, I'm not sure calendars were as back to back to back as they are and have been over the last 2 years, when all you have to do is push a button, hang up a phone, and then pick up another phone or pick up the next call. So I think there could be some benefits related to pacing, related to collaboration, related to cohesion, and related to culture that come with going back into an office, even just on a occasional basis to connect with staff and workers.
Tameshia, thank you so much for joining me. If you take a look on the screen, you can see the social media and website for the JFF where you can learn more information. And once again, thank you so much for joining me. We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back. The month of March is dedicated to Women's History Month, and I want to take this time to give a quick shout out to our all-women team here at Open Tuesday. Now, in honor of Women's History Month, Jennifer Herrera of the National Women's History Museum joins me for a discussion on the recognition of female achievements and the importance of preserving that information in our country. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here.
So, as I mentioned, it's Women's History Month. Can you tell me about your organization and how you actually celebrate the month?
Yes, I'm with the National Women's History Museum. We are the nation's leading cultural institution dedicated to sharing the stories of women throughout history and including up to present day and contemporary women that are making history.
Now, I understand that you have a resource toolkit on your website. Can you tell me what that is and what you're actually offering this year?
Yeah, for all of the big months of the year, Black History Month, Pride, Women's History Month, we publish a resource toolkit that has a resource for every day of the work week. So that way, educators and students and corporations can have this ready-made package toolkit filled with resources and events and programs to really celebrate that month and explore the women's contributions throughout the month.
Now, quoting a really important line from this resource, Women's History Month seeks to correct the imbalance. Can you explain what this imbalance is and why your organization really wanted to highlight this?
Yeah, every March, all eyes are on women's accomplishments and women's history because it is Women's History Month. But for so long, women have been left out of the national narrative, and we really seek to correct that. We want to bring forth the stories of women that have been forgotten or, quite frankly, omitted from our national narrative and really embed them in the fabric of the conversations that we're having today. So we seek to correct this imbalance by highlighting not just the accomplishments and contributions, but the history itself, the challenges, the voices, the stories. We want every women's story and every voice to have a platform, to have a place to be heard and shared and celebrated.
Now, I understand that your organization actually conducted some research on women's history titled Where Are the Women? I love that title, so I'm so happy you guys chose that. I think it really speaks to the situation at hand. Can you tell me more about this study and what you actually found?
Yeah, so we released this study called Where Are the Women in 2017, and it looked at the representation of women in U.S. state social studies standards. So really, what are we teaching our kids? What are students growing up learning about women? And what we found with this groundbreaking study was kind of obvious, right? Women are not taught. Women, when they are taught, it's very episodic. So you might learn about, let's say, Amelia Earhart growing up. But the story of women's involvement in aviation really begins and ends in the classroom with Amelia Earhart. And so we really want to work to change that. We want that educators have access to the tools to teach women's history and to bring more women into the classroom and into the curriculum, but also for students to have an opportunity to learn about all of the women that really are missing from these history books.
Now, according to your research, fewer than 11% of textbook references are devoted to specific women in K-12 state history standards and curricula in the United States as of 2017, as you mentioned. Do you feel our schools today are still struggling when it comes to education about women's history?
Absolutely. We're doing better. It's more accessible. Women's history is more accessible now than ever before, but we really need to give our educators the tools in which to teach women's history. And it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one-stop shop. There's so much to do to give these educators the tools, because it's not because there's not a lack of interest on the part of our educators. It's a structural problem that we have, and it's not limited to textbooks. It's to look at public sculpture and monuments to women. Look at street signs. women are largely missing from our national narrative across our entire country in every aspect of our culture and society. So really, it's about correcting an entire system to incorporate women's history in really every aspect of our lives. So that way it's not rare, it's there. Because we know that the history, women have been here all along. We're 51% of the population, but our stories are missing. So we really seek to change that.
Can you tell me about some things your organization has done to ensure that people, but especially the youth, stay educated about the advancements women have made in history?
Yeah, well, we have developed a really incredible, rich website that is free for all to access. It's filled with hundreds and hundreds of biographies of contemporary women, of women from history, and it explores their accomplishments. It's such a great resource to have at your fingertips, a collection of these biographies. But also we have resources for educators. We have classroom lesson plans and virtual field trips and virtual exhibits. We also do a lot of programming. So for instance, we have a program called Brave Girls Virtual Storytime, where we invite an author to come and read their book to classrooms virtually and take Q&As with the children and their educators. We have a program called Sundays at Home that invites people to take a women's history break every Sunday, not every Sunday, a couple Sundays a month, to explore topics related to women's history. You know, women's history it should not be episodic, right? It needs to be folded into everything we do, and it needs to be accessible. So one of the things we're really proud of is that our content is free, it is accessible, and it is widely accessed by more than 4 million visitors a year to our website.
So something that I really love about your website as a woman of color is that it focuses on intersectionality. Now, I've learned a lot about intersectionality in feminism and women's history through elective courses and from social media. How would you say social media has impacted what young adults and even teens know about women's history?
Well, it's made it more accessible. I'm surprised and delighted at the content creators that are out there pushing women's history to their audiences. It is much more accessible than ever before. And so I think that younger generations will have an easier time accessing this history as we go forth, but not just accessing past history. You know, history is now. We are living through history. And if you see that with things like COVID, we created a journaling project called Women Writing History because we wanted to make sure that the voices of young girls and women were not lost to history during this pandemic. So we really want to make sure that it's not just the history of the past, but that contemporary voices are being recorded and shared, so that way we don't ever have to play catch up again.
So I kind of want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. You said that women's history shouldn't be episodic. I think that's really amazing because I see that a lot with these history months. We tend to focus on it during that month. What do you think we should do to make sure that we are honoring and celebrating women every month of the year and not just in March?
Well, thank you so much for that question. Here at the National Women's History Museum, we certainly celebrate women's history all year long. And I think what it really comes down to is being intentional about sharing the stories, being intentional about inclusion and access, and really letting it be top of mind all year long. If you're putting together a newsletter at work, if you're having conversations with people, it's really in the daily work that we do to uplift and bring these stories to light. You know, one other thing that's really important to our institution is that, of course, there are all these incredible pioneering women who have done incredible work, and we are so excited to celebrate them and share their stories. But also, you don't have to be an astronaut for your story to matter. You just have to be. And so we really want to make sure that, you know, especially young children can see themselves in the the incredible women on whose shoulders we stand, but also know that their story and their voice matters, even without going to space, that every woman's story matters.
So I'm really happy that you said that. I thought that was kind of a beautiful thing to say, and I think it will resonate with a lot of women and girls watching. What do you think could be done now to ensure young women and girls aren't waiting until Women's History Month or to go to college to understand the important role they play in society?
Well, I think we just need to continue to lift them up. We need to empower our young girls to really, the idea that if you can see it, you can be it. That's part of what we work really hard to showcase, but also just making sure they know that they're important and that their voice has worth. And the more we can rally around this idea as a society, the more we will be able to empower and inspire future generations that come after us.
So before we go, I just want to know some women that inspire you. Can you just give a shout out to some amazing women that inspire you every day?
Oh, yes. Well, I have some really strong women in my family that I love, my mom and my aunt and my grandmothers. But really, I know a bunch of really strong women that work tirelessly in civic engagement to make the world a better place. So I'm really honored to know them. And as one more, I really like Lucille Ball, too.
So where can people go to learn more about your organization?
Yes, thank you. Please visit us on our website, which is womenshistory.org. We hope you go there and spend some time learning about women, but also joining us at our events. We have so many virtual events, and we're gearing up to do some in-person events again now that the pandemic has changed a little bit, that we can safely have some in-person events. So join us. Really, our virtual events, no matter where you are in the world, you can tune in and join us and learn. So we really invite you to come and visit our website.
And so we have just under a minute left, but I also want to talk about the importance of not just women. It's not just for women. I'm sure it's also for people who are allies, people who want to learn how to support women. Could you quickly just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, women's history is American history. And as the mom of 3 boys, I think it's really important that we teach our sons and our young men the importance of women's contributions as well. Women's history is everyone's history. And so it is our responsibility to tell a complete and accurate and inclusive history, because you're not getting an accurate history without it. So while we focus on women's history specifically, it really could be said for all of these histories, all of the voices that are not always at the table. So it's inclusive history is accurate history. Inclusive history is good history. So that's our mission.
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me. If you take a look at the screen, you will see their social media where you can learn more and see all of these resources. Once again, thank you so much for joining me, and happy Women's History Month. We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back. One organization is helping local residents supplement their food needs through urban farming. Let's take a quick look at what growing uptown is all about. We're here to talk more today about growing uptown with Executive Director of the Dyckman Farmhouse Museum Alliance, Meredith Horsford. Meredith, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So can you tell me more about the Dyckman Farmhouse Alliance Museum?
Sure. It is a 1784 Dutch colonial farmhouse that was, like I said, built in the late 1700s. And it was lived in by the Dyckman family and built by the Dyckman family until the mid 1800s, and it became a museum in 1916.
Now, in regards to growing uptown, the organization or the program will provide residents with the tools they need to begin their own urban gardens. Why did you want to introduce this to families in the Bronx?
Well, one of the things that we already know about our local communities is that people are experiencing food shortage and food insecurity. And this was really obviously exacerbated by the pandemic. So this was a program that we created in 2020 as a way to continue to serve our community and their needs while we were closed to the public because of the pandemic.
So I'm really happy that you brought that up, because I was going to say that I understand that the program stemmed from seeing the aftermath of the pandemic. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. There are a lot of community partners that are already kind of working in this space, like New York Common Pantry, who we partnered with on this project. And we know that during the pandemic, when everyone else had to shut down, they also had to shut down their food pantry and all of their pickup locations, which were across Inwood and the Bronx. So we partnered with them on this project because they already had a built-in audience of people that were interested and in need of work and projects like this one. And so we put together these grow kits and they distributed them on our behalf while their pickup locations were closed because of the pandemic. So it ended up being a great opportunity and a great time to serve people's needs.
So can you actually tell me a little bit more about these grow kits? I think that they just sound like so adorable. So could you just tell us what a grow kit is and what it will be used for when you give it to these families?
Absolutely. So a grow kit for us includes grow bags, which are fabric bags that you can actually grow food in, organic soil, seedlings. We include a trowel and all of the things that you would need to get started on your kind of urban gardening journey. And we know that people living in New York City haven't necessarily had a lot of experience with gardening. So what's on the screen you'll see is some of the information that kind of accompanies the grow kit. So it's step-by-step instructions on how to take care of, how to plant, how to take care of, how to harvest, and how to cook with your crops. And of course, all of the things that we distribute, both on paper and on our website, which are the video versions of what you just showed, are also bilingual.
And what are some examples of Bronxites growing their own food? Can you tell us some experiences that you've actually seen through this?
So we've partnered with a lot of different, we've partnered with the senior center at the Dyckman houses, for example, which is in Inwood, some local schools. And so we've got both kids and adults who are participating. And of course, we also feel like it's the whole family that's participating and kind of learning from the experience. And so what we've been receiving from these participants are photos and just sort of, in some cases, drawings also of kind of how this journey has been for them, what they've been growing, and able to cook with the ingredients as well.
And how is this a better alternative to some of the local produce that we have available, maybe in our grocery stores or like some stands that we see when we walk by on the street?
Sure. Well, it certainly doesn't replace the need to ever go to the grocery store, right? But this is a great way to supplement your needs and to grow things that are really fresh. The items that are in the grocery store have been picked quite some time ago. So these items that you're going to grow on your own windowsill are fresh. You know that they haven't been sprayed with pesticides. And it's a great way to learn how to grow crops so that you can continue to grow things in the future and you can choose whatever crops work best for your family.
So I think it's very important to note that if people are interested, today is the last day that you can register. But can you walk me through what a typical day in the program would look like?
Sure. So once you get your grow kit, which will take place sometime in early April, you would then get the process starting to plant your seedlings with the materials that we give you, as well as the guide videos that are on our website. Additionally, we will hold monthly workshops at the Dyckman Farmhouse Museum for participating people and families, which will basically allow them to get to the next stage in the growing process. So that would be once a month. And then, of course, we will continue to check in with families on how everything is going.
So this next thing I think is really cool and I love it because I'm always looking for new recipes. You provide these recipes that promote cleaner eating as well as some family favorites. Can you explain the importance of clean and healthy eating, especially for Dyckman and neighboring communities in the Bronx?
Sure. We know that we have a lot of fast food, a lot of fried food in our communities, which tastes delicious but isn't always great for you. So, one of the things that we really wanted to provide through this program are recipes that you can cook that are economical and healthy and will feed and nourish your family. So, we created some recipes in house that that dovetail nicely with the grow kits and what you'll be growing at home so that you can create healthy, delicious meals that are really fresh for your family.
And you talked about like just like really great food that we have. I also want to bring up that Dyckman is known for its thriving Dominican community, and I'm sure there are other rich cultures within the area. What changes or things you added to the program to ensure that it was accessible and inclusive to the community in the area?
Yeah, great question. That's something we're always thinking about how we can better and continue to serve our community. So, some of the things that we really thought about when we were creating the program were the types of crops that people would be growing. So, thinking about really kind of universal foods like squash, onion, cilantro, basil that could be really incorporated into most cuisines. But yes, of course, thinking about our large population of people from the Dominican Republic. Also, making sure that the program is bilingual so that it's accessible, and making sure that we have information that's available on our website, or for people who don't have access to that, that there's print material as well that everyone receives.
So I just want to make sure that it's very clear that today is the last day to register. So if you are interested, please sign up. Today will be the last day. Is there any requirements or anything like that that people should know about?
Absolutely not. Just go to our website, which is dyckmanfarmhouse.org. It will be on the homepage to sign up. And basically, it's just a very brief registration questionnaire where we just ask what kinds of information you already know about growing. And if you know absolutely nothing or you know a whole lot, you're very welcome.
And if they, for some reason, miss it this year, I do understand that this is an annual thing. Can you just let people know how they can stay up to date with this particular program?
Absolutely. It is an annual program, and it starts around this time every year since 2020. And if people are interested in keeping up with this and other programs that we do, feel free to take a look at our website, dyckmanfarmhouse.org, follow us on social media. Also, on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. And of course, come and visit the museum. We have information there as well.
All right, Meredith, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. Florida's House of Representatives passed the Don't Say Gay bill, restricting discussions on sexual orientation and gender in the classroom. Let's take a quick look at this clip.
All right, Chelsea, you're up. Tell us about your hero.
I have two heroes, my two moms.
It's okay. You should be proud. Go ahead.
Mrs. Thompson, please report to the front office.
Joining me to discuss the impact this will have on LGBT youth is Executive Director for the Zebra Coalition, Heather Wilkie. Heather, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So for those who don't know, can you just tell us a little bit more about the Don't Say Gay bill?
Yes, the Don't Say Gay bill is a very harmful bill that is passing right now, that just passed in the Senate, and it can have a lot of terrible implications on our young people. Potentially in the classroom, teachers would not be allowed to acknowledge LGBTQ students and their families. So if a kid comes out and says, "Hi, I have two moms," that discussion can't happen in the classroom. Books cannot be read in the classroom that discusses LGBTQ individuals. So essentially it silences our young people and invalidates their feelings and their experiences. It's a very harmful bill when you think about it from a mental health perspective. The potential impact that it could have on these kids is just massive.
Now, you kind of mentioned it, but this directly affects LGBTQ youth in Florida, as well as the community at large, and of course, even here in the Bronx. How will the passing of this bill negatively affect their experience as members of the LGBTQ community?
Well, you know, we are starting to see other states and other communities pick up similar style bills. And so it's very frightening to know that Florida is starting what could end up being something that's happening across the country. And, you know, we all have family members in different locations, and I think that it's important to care about our community. There is certainly an LGBTQ community there, and we would want to support everyone there, just like we hope that people are looking at Florida right now.
Now, according to the CDC Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance data, many LGBTQ youth suffer from high health and suicide risk than their peers. How will this bill contribute to that?
You are right. And that data, oftentimes, it is triple the amount of a likelihood that someone who is LGBTQ would be would have suicidal ideation, thoughts of suicide, depression, and anxiety. And now we know that they don't even feel safe going into schools. If they can't speak to an adult, a trusted person, about the way that they feel, then how is that going to impact their mental health? We do anticipate that there will be a need to step in and provide additional support for these young kids.
Now, people in favor of the bill say this will aim to eventually teach gender and sexuality at an appropriate age. This is very controversial. Can you just explain what does this mean and what is considered an appropriate age to teach the youth about LGBT community?
Sure. Well, I think the problem is that we're trying to lump this in with sex education, and being LGBT does not have to do with sex education. That association is inaccurate. We're talking about gender identity. We're talking about who a person is, something that they cannot change, something that is not a choice, and something that is permanent. And so we have to look at it that way. We have to look at it as these are human beings and they have human experiences that must be validated.
I'm really happy that you brought that up, and I kind of want to focus on that a little bit. People tend to group gender and sexuality together all the time. Can you just explain, why we're seeing that whenever we have these conversations?
You know, that LGBTQ acronym just keeps on growing, right? And we keep lumping things together when essentially gender identity is very different from sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is about who we love, who we're attracted to, whereas gender identity is about how we feel and who we are. And so it's very much, oftentimes it's not able to be distinguished among the general population, but it's very different. If you think about your gender, this is how we feel, this is how we dress, this is how we behave. It's essentially who we are at our core, versus sexuality is more about who we're attracted to.
So, kind of piggybacking off of my previous question, just talking about what's an appropriate age and all that stuff, can you speak to the double standard of heteronormativity? I know it's a really large word and some people don't know what that actually means. So, one, can you explain it? And then can you speak to the double standard of that?
Heteronormativity is just assuming that we all have straight cisgender experiences, right? So it's this attitude that my experience is better than yours if I am heterosexual, if I'm not LGBTQ, or that not just better than, but that's the norm, right? And so the idea behind being able to teach about different family experiences in classrooms is very important. You know, I have a 7-year-old, he's in first grade, and we're allowed to send books to school, and we have a lot of books about him having 2 moms. And, you know, if this law is passed, the teachers would not be allowed to read that book. And most likely it is going to pass. And that, to me, it's just very sad as a parent to know that my kid would not feel welcome or not feel validated in his classroom.
So the people in support of this bill said they, will eventually teach them about this. Do you believe that there will actually be an effort to eventually teach even older LGBTQ youth about their history?
You know, I would only hope, but it seems like in Florida, that's just a response to make people feel a little bit better when we haven't seen that type of action. We've seen actually amendments being filed that were even more harmful. And so, it's all about action, not words at this point. And so far, it's not looking great.
Now, I want to know, are schools even doing that now? Are schools teaching children about LGBTQ history?
Some schools do, and that's really up to the teachers. And we're just now starting to see some states, mostly not Florida, some states incorporate LGBTQ history into their curriculum. Ideally, that's what we would like to see moving forward. But there are ways that we can still teach it through the Gay Straight Alliance or Gender and Sexuality Alliances in schools, clubs, things like that.
So what I think that's really scary about this bill is that kids can no longer use school as a safe space if they're exploring their identity. Parents are now allowed access to everything and require that schools notify parents if they see several changes. How could this actually hurt the child instead of protecting them, especially in the household?
A lot of kids come from homes that are not affirming. There are some great parents out there, but not every parent has their kids back, right? And we know that to be true based on just organizations like Zebra Coalition, is that we have a lot of parents that are not affirming. And so school ends up being a safe space for them. They have peer support. They often have administration support. They maybe have 1 or 2 teachers they can talk to. If this law goes through, that means that they don't have that safety net. And I'm here to protect kids. Kids are humans. And whether we want to believe it or not, because we may have an idea as a parent of what we can control, at the end of the day, by not talking about this issue doesn't help anything. It's just putting it under the rug. And what message that sends is that I'm not valid, that I'm not okay, that my experiences aren't valid.
Now, resistance has been strong and high schoolers have begun protesting against the bill. What are your thoughts on this?
I love to see that. That was wonderful, and I'm still seeing it. The kids are doing walkouts across the state of Florida. I've even seen some across the country. We've had teachers who are supporting them, principals supporting them. Celebrities are getting behind this and posting about how kids are doing national walkouts. This is a silent protest. That's what it's all about. These kids have a voice, and that voice needs to be heard.
And can you tell me a little bit about the Proud to Say Gay March? I know that was something that was also really huge, and a lot of people just kind of talking about their experience and saying, like, I'm not going to stay quiet. Can you just tell me about that?
Those chants were wonderful. We had a lot of people who just stood out and said, you know what, I'm going to march. Here in Orlando, we had an organization step up, and several of us were able to, as leaders, have a protest. We organized marches. And so it's great to see that. That's how you get it done. That's how you get attention.
And I also want to bring up large organizations because Disney recently got into some hot water for their stance on this, and people have been talking about either they were silent or supporting people who were in favor of this bill. What are your thoughts on that, on organizations and not speaking out against certain things like this?
You know, this is the moment to stand up for these kids. This is the moment to say, hey, as a company, as an organization, we support your voice and we want you to feel like you are valid and that we understand you and love you. And this is an opportunity. And so it's unfortunate to see that some companies aren't taking that opportunity, or they're doing the opposite and, you know, silencing these kids or saying that, you know, it doesn't matter how you feel. That's the message. And remember, these kids are going to grow up and they're going to make decisions about how they support these corporations.
What are some ways that allies could be supportive to the LGBTQ community during this time? Because I think a lot of people talk about being an ally, but now is something happening in history. How can people actually support this community?
Allies are so important to this conversations. We need allies to be able to have our movement and to move our movement forward, right? And so I would say talking about the issues, sharing your own experiences with your friends and family members who are LGBTQ, educating yourself on these issues, making sure that you're talking about them at the table, making sure that you aren't quiet about it on social media. You know, let your voice be heard. We need everybody at the table to build an army to stand up against these kids, or to stand up for these kids.
Now, we have just a few minutes left. Can you tell me a little bit more about your organization and the resources you provide?
Sure. My organization, the name is Zebra Coalition, and we are an LGBTQ plus youth organization. We provide services for youth ages 13 to 24. Those services include primarily mental health support, housing, and we have a drop-in center in Central Florida where we're able to see young people who may be experiencing homelessness or just need a sense of support and have the ability to see their peers. So organizations like ours exist across the country. There's actually a network called the centerlink.org where you can look up youth LGBTQ organizations like Zebra Coalition. You can also go to our website at zebrayouth.org to find out more about what it is that we do.
And before I let you go, can you just give a quick message to the LGBTQ community here in the Bronx, but of course all over this country and even the world?
Absolutely. First of all, we see you. Your voice matters. We want to make sure that we do not stop fighting until we achieve full equality. The fight is not over. We have just begun in many ways. So you are loved and supported.
Heather, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
That's all for our show today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kibin, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.